Hello, and welcome once again to Lehto's Law. I'm Steve Lehto, attorney at law in the state of Michigan, where I'm practicing law for 24 years in the fields of consumer protection and lemon law. I often write about the stuff for places like Jalopnik, Opposite Lock, and Road and Track. Today we're going to talk about how to find the best mechanic. How to find the best mechanic. I get hate mail from mechanics, but I also get hate mail from a variety of other professions. People think I pick on them because I point out the bad things that bad people do. But you know, it's the bad ones that give us all a bad name. There's more good ones than there are bad ones in most professions. The hard part is, how do you find them? And I'm going to tell you the secret. I get emails from people who say, Steve, how do I find a good mechanic? You've started out in the right direction by asking somebody, and that's the key. You get a referral. That's how you find a good mechanic, a good lawyer, a good body shop, a good car dealer, anything. You're looking for someone who does something. Ask around. Get a referral. I'll tell you right now, if you ask me, Steve, where do I find a good mechanic in Oakland County? I've got the guy for you. And I go to him, and he does great work on my vehicles. He's reasonably priced. He does the work well. He does the work swiftly. And I've always felt like I got a fair shake from the guy. I love the guy. Well, how did I find him? When I needed a mechanic, I asked my brother, because my brother's got a couple older cars that have stayed on the road far too long, and they've done that with the help of a great mechanic that's been helping my brother keep those cars on the road. And he's always talking about this guy who does great work on his cars, charges them a great price, gets the work done well, and he's helping keep these cars alive much longer than they really ought to be on the road. So I asked my brother, hook me up with this guy. My brother gave me the guy's name and number. I take my vehicles there. He's done great work for me. And I asked him, I said, by the way, Rick, how did you find this guy? How did you find this guy? Because the guy's not anywhere near where my brother lives. And he said, well, I was at work one day and I overheard a coworker mentioning that he had this great mechanic who did great work, did the work on time, didn't overcharge him. He always felt like he's getting a fair shake from the guy. He goes, so I asked the guy, what's his name and number? I'll go there. And sure enough, he went there, got a great deal, was treated well, and then he sent me there. So I send people there. And that's how it works. That's how it works in every profession. I'm here to tell you, there are bad mechanics out there. There are good mechanics out there. Ask around. You can find each. But you want to avoid the bad ones. So I can tell you the bad ones I've dealt with, and I can tell you the good ones I've dealt with. Go to the good ones. This will all work out in the end, okay? And this is true in every profession. I'm here to tell you that there are lawyers out there who specialize in stuff, and there's lawyers out there who are general practitioners who can handle, a little bit of everything. But generally speaking, if you have a specialized legal problem, you want to go to somebody who knows what they're doing in that specialized field. And I'll give you an example. I had a person call me up one time and they say, hey, Steve, I got a problem. My husband worked on the railroad for a long, long time, and he has a pension, and then he passed away. And I'm having a problem with getting something done with his pension. Now, I heard the words passed away, pension, and railroad, and recognized that I was 0 for 3. I don't know anything about any of those things. And in respect to what I do for a living, because my practice is consumer law. I handle car problems. I handle, people bought bad products problems. So I had recently spoken to somebody who said, by the way, this is what I do for a living. I specialize in, I'm not making this up, railroad pensions. Who does that? Well, it turns out there's somebody who does railroad pension law. So I told my caller, I said, here, call this person. I gave him the name and number. Said, tell him my name. Say, hey, Steve Lehto told me to call you. Said, this is what you do. And I got phone calls from both of them later saying, yeah, we hooked up. We're going to take care of each other. And so this attorney who specializes in this weird field of law took this case, handled it, took care of this person. And I got a phone call several months later from the client saying, hey, Steve, thanks for hooking me up with that person because they took care of my problem for me. And the attorney called me later to thank me. He said, by the way, Steve, I took care of the person you sent me. If you ever have another problem with a railroad pension, send it my way. Well, in 24 years, I've only had that phone call once. I doubt I'll ever hear it again. But the point is, there's somebody out there who handles that particular problem. Now, since I do lemon law all day long, as you can imagine, I get phone calls from people who've got bad cars. Well, one day I get a phone call from a person who says, hey, Steve, I've got this defective car. It's been in the shop umpteen times, and I think it's a lemon. And I said, well, it sounds like it is. Let me look at your paperwork. She said, well, I got a problem. I go, what's that? She said, I've already hired an attorney, and he's already screwed up my case. I said, what do you mean he screwed the case? How can he screw this up? It's a slam dunk. And she said, well, he doesn't know what he's doing. He filed a complaint with a bunch of counts that have already been kicked out of court because the judge said these are not good counts. And the attorney for the manufacturer is running us ragged. And we're not doing very well. And I'm worried we're going to get the entire case thrown out of court. And it's only because I've got an incompetent attorney. And I said, well, normally I don't like to get involved in cases that are already going down in flames because, how can I win? The best I can do is, is save this thing. And even then, it still kind of makes me look bad. But I said, well, I don't know what I can do for you. She said, no. My attorney's in so far over his head, he told me to call another attorney. And I said, oh my gosh, I've never heard of that before. I said, if that's true, have him call me and I'll see what I can do. And 5 minutes later, I get a phone call. Attorney introduces himself, says, Steve, I shouldn't have tried to handle this case. I don't know what I'm doing. I got this, we're in trouble. I'm in front of this bad judge. The judge hates us. He's dismissed almost all of our accounts. We're about to get completely, dismissed. And I said, okay, that's not good. I go, but it sounds to me like you've got a great case. And he explained to me how he was handling the case, and I realized almost immediately he's doing everything wrong. And what's funnier is that the attorney who's defending the case, I knew very, very well. I said, I know that guy. I've got a dozen cases with him right now. I've had hundreds of cases with him over the years. Let me get involved. So I actually filed an appearance on the case, and I helped them straighten the matter out, and eventually we got her a settlement. And there is no doubt in my mind that if I had not gotten involved and if that attorney had not admitted he was in over his head, that case simply would have crashed and burned like so many other cases being mishandled by people who have no business getting outside of their comfort zone. So, every attorney out there has got something they're good at, some area they're focused on. They should at least. And you want to find that attorney for your case. So, let's suppose you know no attorneys. You don't know any attorneys, which, by the way, is almost mathematically impossible. If you've got friends, you know attorneys because there's so many of us now. I think in Michigan there's like 35,000 attorneys. That number could be low now. It could be gotten even higher. So you need to find an attorney. If you don't know any attorneys, ask your friends. Go, hey, do you guys know any attorneys? Now, the odds of your friends knowing an attorney who specializes in what you need a specialist in is very, very low. But that's not why you're asking. So let's suppose that you need an attorney who does railroad pension law, okay? And you ask around and you say, I've got a problem with a railroad pension, okay? And I need a referral. And your friend says, hey, my cousin is an attorney, okay? You call that attorney and you don't say, hey, will you handle my case? You say, hey, I'm looking for an attorney who can help me with this. Do you know somebody who can help me with this? And that attorney will know many attorneys and hopefully will know somebody who handles that particular kind of law, whatever it might be. And you'd be surprised. I mean, I personally know a few dozen attorneys very, very well. But I also know of hundreds of attorneys. And I can tell you right now that I know attorneys who specialize in some of the strangest things. I know a guy who does nothing but, airplane accidents. How many of those are there? Well, there's enough to keep this guy busy, So whatever it is, and it's you ask around and eventually you'll find somebody. And then once you find somebody, depending on what the field is, okay, with lawyers in particular, I always say you've got to talk to them first, okay? And I know there's attorneys out there who are cringing saying, Steve, I do divorce law and I don't want to talk to potential clients because they can, disqualify me. Well, number one, that's an urban legend, but if you want to believe that, that's great. But in most fields, you can get the attorney on the phone and talk to them and say, by the way, this is my case. Have you ever handled one like this before? Are you comfortable handling these? How long have you been practicing law? And so on. Now, you can go on the internet and do a search and look for an attorney by specialty, okay? And you might get results that way also, but the problem there, of course, is then the referral's not coming from a friend or an acquaintance. The referral's coming from search engine optimization and Google. And a lot of attorneys have hired marketing firms that will get them to the top of search engines. And it doesn't mean that they're good at what they do. It just means they're good at what they've hired someone else to do, and that is get the top of the Google search. So, like I said, you want to get a referral from somebody you know. That's the key. So, like I said, I did that with mechanics to find the mechanic who works in my car. You can do that with a mechanic also. And again, like I said, you could go on the internet and look for mechanics, but ask your friends. The odds are that one of your friends, one of your coworkers, or one of your relatives has had a good experience with a mechanic. Now, try to avoid the mechanics or the lawyers or the accountants or whatever who are simply relatives. When they say, oh, by the way, yeah, I know a mechanic. My cousin's a mechanic. Go to him. Be careful and listen to why they are referring you to somebody. If they say, I'm referring you to this person because they're a relative, that's not what you're looking for. You're looking for somebody who's being referred because they're good, okay? So ask around. Now, here's the thing. This applies to other fields as well. It applies to mechanics, it applies to lawyers, obviously. It applies to car dealers, okay? Now, I know people who go car shopping, and they go car shopping by, they go, well, I want to buy this car. I want to buy the, this make, model, and year of car. And they go onto eBay, they go to Craigslist, they do a search, or if they're looking for a brand new car, they'll do a search that way, okay? And then they price shop. Where can I find this car the cheapest? Now, if you don't know this, you can't really get a hugely different deal from one dealer to the next. You can get a little bit of a deal, but nothing gigantic. And the problem that you have is if you're simply price shopping, if you're merely price shopping, you're going to buy a car from this dealer because it's got a lower price, you possibly will regret that. And the reason I say that is there are car dealers in southeastern Michigan I wouldn't take a car from if they gave it to me, okay? There are 2 or 3 I can think of by name right now in Oakland County where they said, Steve, we've got a car, come on over, it's yours for free, you can have it. I would actually say, no thanks. I don't want to deal with them because they are pure evil, okay? So before you buy a car from anybody, and even if you found a great deal, let's suppose you actually think, hey, I got a great deal from this one dealer, no one will touch this deal. You should still ask around, okay? Ask your friends, neighbors, relatives, coworkers. Have you ever dealt with this dealer? Have you ever dealt with them before? Do you know anything about them? Have you heard about them? What was your experience like? You have to remember, a car dealership's got a lot of employees. How about a particular salesperson, okay? If you pick up the phone and simply talk to whoever answers the phone at that dealer, you don't know who you're going to get. Ask around and go, hey, look, do you know anybody at this dealer who might be able to help me? And if you find somebody who says, well, I don't know anybody at that dealer, but I know somebody at this dealer, call them anyways. Say, by the way, I'm thinking about buying a car from this other dealer. Can you help me out? You'd be surprised what people will do for friends of friends, okay? So ask around about car sellers as well as car mechanics, okay? And that's extremely important. Like I said, I know people who bought a car, they got a great deal on it at some dealership that has a horrible service reputation, and they deserve it. And people call me back and they say, well, I got a great deal on the car, but I hate the dealership. And then the question becomes, would you have paid a little bit more to deal with a better car dealership? And a lot of times I would pay a little bit more for a better experience. I know there's people out there right now who will say, no, Steve, you don't understand. I'll kill my own mother and step over the bodies of all my relatives to save $1. There are people out there who will do that. I'm not like that. I'll pay a couple extra bucks for better service. And again, it applies in every field. Body shops, okay? Your car has body damage to it. Now, your insurance company might say, you've got to take it here. You must take it here. If they do that, you've got no choice. But if they say, hey, look, find a good dealer, and as long as the estimate comes in right, we'll pay for it. Ask around about body shops. Same thing. I know body shops out there that, I'd rather rattle can my own car than take it to because they do horrible work. And there's body shops out there that do fabulous work. And I know if price were no object, I know the dealership I would take my car to. Let's suppose I had a rare car or a collector car and it had works that needed to be done on it. I would bring it to this one dealership because I know that that's the best body shop in probably the entire state of Michigan. So you take it there, okay? Ask around and find out. You'd be surprised at what you'll find out by asking around. And, I tell people this applies in almost every field. And for instance, I'll give you another horror story. I had a client of mine who one day, somebody came by, stuck a flyer in his mailbox and said, we do power washing of decks. If you've got a deck that needs to be power washed, we'll power wash your deck for you. And it said, lowest price guaranteed. My client said, you know something? The deck needs a power wash. And I've got the phone number right here on the flyer, so I guess I don't need to go on the internet and do some research or call around and get quotes. And he calls this number, and the guy says, yeah, come on, I'll come on out and I'll power wash your deck. It's a college kid. He shows up with a power washer, immediately proceeds to strip all the paint and the top layer of wood off of every surface on the deck and destroys the deck. I saw photographs of the deck where it's amazing the damage you can do with a power washer to wood, okay? You take the paint off, and you take off the first layer of wood, and it looks like it's been sandblasted. It was horrible. The surfaces were no longer smooth. So that if the guy merely repainted this deck, it would have looked horrible because the surfaces weren't flat anymore. It was the craziest thing. I'm like, how'd the guy do this? Don't you test one spot and see what's happening? And, I'm not an expert on power washers, but it turns out that after the litigation ensued, we found out that the guy with this power washing company had never power washed any decks before. He'd come home from college and his dad said, get a job. And he said, oh, I've got an idea. I'm going to start my own business. So he went to Home Depot or someplace like that. He bought a power washer. He went to Kinko's and made up flyers and handed them out. He'd never done it before. He didn't know what he was doing. And my client didn't ask him, how many decks have you power washed? He just said, oh, the guy's got a good looking flyer. He's got a brand new looking machine. He's a clean cut young kid. I'll hire him to do this. And the guy proceeds to destroy his deck. Okay? What could he have done, my client? My client could have asked his friends, neighbors, and relatives, hey, has anybody here ever had a deck power washed by somebody before? Who would you hire to do that? And ask around, and you might find somebody out there who does it. Another thing I've actually encountered before is somebody who had a flyer that said, we do work for people, and we're bonded and insured. Turns out that bonded and insured means something. And you'd be surprised at how many places actually aren't bonded or insured. So that's the kind of thing you might find out if you ask around and ask people, by the way, do you know somebody who does this? Do you have somebody you'd recommend? And I know people nowadays who say, well, you can always check Yelp, or some other online complaint source. And I would say, well, you might want to check that also, okay? But keep in mind there's a couple problems with Yelp. Yelp tracks complaints, and theoretically you can go onto Yelp and say something nice about somebody, but nobody ever does. People get inspired to file complaints when they get upset, but the problem is people also file complaints against their competitors, okay? And people will also fill Yelp up with fake good reviews to overcome the bad reviews, and there's companies out there that will actually do this for you. You can pay them, and they'll clean up your Yelp review by filing a bunch of fake good reviews. So it's kind of hard to wade through the complaints and the compliments on Yelp and find out which ones are real, which ones are not real. And these are all anonymous people you don't know anyways. The whole point is to talk to somebody you know and find out what they know. Do they know a mechanic? Do they know a lawyer? Do they know a body shop or a car dealer that they like? Talk to them and find out why they like that person, and then go to that person, okay? And this is how you find a good mechanic. And if you find a good mechanic, and this is why mechanics shouldn't send me hate mail, although I know they will. When you find a good mechanic, cling to that person like they are one of the most important people in your life, because they are. You need a good mechanic. Everyone needs a good mechanic. Somewhere in your life, you're going to need a good mechanic to look at your car and say, here's my opinion. Here's what it'll take to fix, or it can't be fixed, okay? I've had so many people call me and say, I got ripped off. The mechanic told me here's what I needed to do. I had no way of knowing. So I just assumed he was telling me the truth. I went with it and I got ripped off. So that's how you find the best mechanic, lawyer, body shop, car dealer, anything. But primarily how to find the best mechanic, get a referral, ask around, follow through, and when you find a good one, go to them and tell all your friends. That's it for today's Lehto's Law. Questions or comments, shoot them my way, lehtoslaw.com. I'm on Twitter also at Steve Lehto, at STEVELEHTO. And this show is on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Podbean, Google Play, and YouTube. Thanks for watching and listening. Bye-bye.